Anyway, so I will call the meeting to order. First of all, we need to approve the agenda for the meeting today. I need a motion.
I move we approve the agenda today.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, public discussion. I don't think
Maybe.
we have any, right?
Okay.
So I think moving on to the real meat of the meeting is the policy review for the confidentiality policy. And I don't know. I think a lot of work went into this. It seems like a well thought out issue. Do we go back? Yeah. So we have called the meeting to order and we got to public discussion and no one was here, but you just barely missed it. So,
I don't want to say anything.
oh, you don't want to say anything? Okay.
See, you know me already, I can tell. Thank you for offering
Well,
it.
I don't know you. I assume you're not being facetious.
I'm not.
Okay.
Just going into this.
Okay, well, welcome.
Thank you.
All right. So moving on to the policy review. Is there anyone who wants to present an overview of how this was approached or board members who have questions?
Provide an overview. Just one change that will have to happen, the date that's revised needs to be the 23rd and not the 21st. That changed. But I'm just going to go over confidentiality and privacy. It's a really important policy for us. We use it pretty much every day in our practice. It's an important pillar of intellectual freedom. Despite all of the edits that are on here, most of it is grammar, and I think the last time we capitalized everything and now we're going back to not capitalizing everything. But a couple of big changes that are in here are explaining a little bit more about what personally identifiable information is, just giving a little bit more of a fuller picture of that. We have a privacy website that patrons can access that goes through every single piece of data that we collect and why we collect it, and how we get rid of it. The other thing we wanted to do was just to clarify who the custodian of the library records is. According to the Attorney General, there was a question about that in 1980. It's the library director, it's not a designee, so we have to fix it there. We wanted to also bring in the Library Bill of Rights, its interpretations, the freedom to read and freedom to use statements. It's also important to put that in here. That's in the collection development policy. It's in our, I believe, meeting room use policy. We wanted to, or excuse me, internet policy. We wanted to put that in here too, because we will refer to that when we are providing procedures or explaining things to patrons. Any changes that have been made, such as we have the security cameras in the library, the Iowa City Police Department does have access, even though they don't view them. We wanted to be upfront about that. I mean, if they don't view them on an ongoing basis, they're not just thinking they're monitoring it.
Right.
And we also want to just tell patrons that we will be continually watching Iowa legislation that relates to confidentiality and privacy of library users, and let them know if any changes are made to our privacy policy because of those changes.
And there are a few additions here that I want to positively call out. Sorry. The ending of 802D, just making sure that you're including explicit citations of Iowa code really helps a lot. I like that. Additionally, when you call out the Library Bill of Rights at 8023, fantastic, and the ALA. There was one more. 80234, scrutiny, embarrassment, or intimidation. All of those are just great explicit ways of just really tightening this up, and I really appreciate it.
The original policy just said, station and people don't want their data provided to other people for a variety of reasons. Yeah, I just.
Do you anticipate? It's hard to anticipate anything that might happen, any legislative encumbrances, but do you anticipate any necessary changes to this given the current legislative session?
Not the current legislative
Okay.
session. But one thing that I think will come up is the relationship between a guardian and a child account. Right now, state law protects a child's account from oversight of a parent. That is protected, it's considered private. State library deems that too, says that their interpretation of state law is that when a child checks something out, a parent does not have access to that information unless it goes into billed status, meaning that the parent has to be provided a list of things that they're paying for.
Because they're financially
They're
liable.
financially
Okay.
obligated to. That, there's a potential that that could change. There is a friction point, I think, with parents sometimes when we're asking them what their checkout history is.
Do we maintain borrowing, like past borrowing records for patrons?
We do not. We do have an opt-in service in our catalog that a patron has to go in and turn on, and they can turn it off at any point and it wipes out. But we ourselves in our system do not maintain a reading history.
So assume, go ahead.
I wanted to ask about retention in general, and I know in the page on the web page, every record has its retention. Is there any point in mentioning that in this policy? I'm not really advocating for that. It just, it occurred to me in reading the policy, how long is this stuff kept? And then I had to go search to figure out where I might find.
I believe something.
We could mention in the policy that we keep a retention record.
Yeah, that there is a list of what's available.
Yeah, I think that would calm some people down and say basically, we don't keep it unless you are directly asking us to. Am I to understand that as soon as, for example, a material is returned, that it is taken off an individual's record?
Yeah, it's actually, there's just 9 million records and they each have an individual retention period. So I don't know. I don't know if anyone else would care.
So I wanted to, an 802.4, 0.34, yeah. The use of the word embarrassment. Wondered if that was the appropriate word, if it was more harassment, because embarrassment to me has a meaning of, it was a humiliation component in the word embarrassment to the actual borrower, and I wonder if it was more harassment. Just for consideration.
Language from the American Library Association.
And so then I'd rather be consistent. Okay.
Okay.
My second question was the retention. We don't actually destroy immediately because of the bed bug policy.
We
So we retain a little.
sort of. So the Sierra does, once you check in a book, it takes it off your record.
Right.
But if I looked at an individual item, so it goes to the shelf, I could look it up. I can find out what the last patron was, but if the next person checks it out, it clears it out for a while. It
And we're
clears it
able,
forever.
but in the past, we've been able to go back through adjacent items on a shelf or bed bug
No, it's
to find the
not,
bed bug source.
it's not, yes and no. So if someone else checks out that book. that-
Right, then it's
Right.
different. But like when we found the bed bugs, we were able to find out which, within a few books that were adjacent to each other, who a few of those books had come from, what home most recently. So we had
Checked out.
right, so we knew who the last borrower had been.
Right, well.
So the record's not gone.
With that bed bug specific incident, that patron had brought back like 75 materials all at once. And that's how, it was within a day that they had brought all these materials back. They had went on vacation.
But the idea is when I want to make sure everyone understands when the book is returned, the record does not disappear. We have a way of going back and figure out who took those books out, which if those records were subpoenaed for other reasons, we have records.
So let me just see if I understand. So once I return something, you can't say what's the last thing Tom Rockland had. But you could conceivably create a record of every book showing who the last person who had it was, and then search that for Tom. Right,
So for sensitive materials, if they were returned, we could find out
right. Someone
Who read
really
them?
wanted to know.
who took them last.
But it would
And I'm not saying we have a better policy. I just want to make sure we understand. It's not a completely clean. It may be the best system, but it's not a completely clean system.
it would have to pass the muster of,
Right.
and
Which in these days, I don't.
there are Supreme Court cases that do say what can pass a subpoena and what can't. And I think that would be a good question for the city attorney's office. When we talked to the state library about that just recently, they said that they're rarely happening because
Right, it rarely
you
happens.
can find that information other ways.
Yeah.
Second filter of this is, I know it will bump off if another patron does it, but after a specific amount of time, we use that data too, because there have been times where like after a year, the book has not gone out. So I do wonder, Sarah, if you could play with that for us if you wanted to.
I'm just
I like that as a concept.
Privacy.
We push that in this, it's more strongly in the lane of privacy. If there's something we could tweak there to get more patron privacy.
I don't know if patrons should understand everything, but we need to know.
Yeah.
As a group. What we have.
And we could ask Sierra about what the options are, when there might be,
After a certain amount, we can clear up.
or is it not retained at all?
Well, we would want to retain it, right?
For a period.
Yeah, I guess.
For a time period, right? but-
For some.
Or we accept the risk. And we don't.
Sounds like a good thing to explore.
I was just surprised during the bed bug days that we thought about this issue, that we could go back and figure out. We have the jokes, and we need to do it as a public health measure, but. The fact that we are able to do this.
But you do start with, I mean, you could theoretically do what Tom said, I think, but you do start with the item. You don't start with,
Yes, we do.
let's see what Tom has
Yes,
checked
but-
out.
okay,
You
so
have an ABC children's book and it's got
But
bugs
but
in
let
it.
me give you an extreme example. If you found a book that may have been used in criminal activity, or there's a layout in the book that would lead someone to think this could have given information towards perpetrating a crime. You could, I mean, and this isn't that unrealistic. This happened in the 1960s. You could find out who had read the book most recently.
But I
You know,
think that
domestic
it does
terrorism.
require a subpoena, and I think,
But we need to know what we own. I'm saying like, this may be our best policy, but we need to understand what our system is for this. And that was not a children's book. Those were not children's books.
well, I hope.
Yeah, the way that information in the 1960s was captured, in the back of the book, everybody's name.
Right, we're a different system, right? Right.
So if you had
That's the level
that
of
same
privacy.
book checked out 5 times this year, and we only have the last patron, whether or not they can tie that specific
Right, right.
activity to that specific.
Right, but if we,
That's something.
but we should keep what we need. in that way.
I think all we need to do is just talk to Sierra and see if there's anything we can do to galvanize.
Yeah, right, we understand.
To see, but that's it.
But then I think there is good discussion about, well, how long do we want to keep
Mhm.
it? Zero,
Mhm.
a little bit?
Yeah, I want to have a debate, sure.
I do want to point out, we keep many backups, days of backups for all this data.
Mhm.
So again, we have records that can go through everything.
Yeah, I always think there's sort of 2 levels. It's a subpoena the requirement of a subpoena is a really good protection
Mhm.
as a judge. But then the next level is, sorry, we can't comply because we
Right,
don't
right.
have it.
Right, for me, only,
What level do we want?
but this is one reason we've always been very conservative on keeping
Yeah.
records, is so that we don't
Can't
have, we
comply.
don't even have to say we can't comply, we just aren't able to, we just don't have. the
Well, that's
records.
what we would say, is we aren't able to.
There, depending on how subpoena was worded, there may be a situation, like if we were trying to find out the last book that a specific person had checked
Yeah.
out, the answer would be we can't do it. Because we have to figure out, can we logistically download how many items in our collection? So download that many records, and then in a way that's certain,
within the limits of a subpoena and before the data goes away.
Right.
Yeah, I think.
Or maybe
I think an
theoretical.
ambitious prosecutor.
But
should
I
not take a technical.
But I still think if we could look at just
difficulty.
how long do we need the records and.
And I'm worried about like attacks on teachers and librarians right now. If someone wanted to see like who checked out those, these 10 books, if it's the same sixth grade teacher, maybe they're
Yeah.
rumors and we're gonna go after them.
Protecting people and their rights, whatever we need to do.
And I'm not saying there's a better policy. I just think we need to know what our limitations are and so where we took our stand.
So where are we?
We could table it and bring back to Sierra information next month if we want to.
I'd be happy to approve it, and then if you feel like you want to make another amendment.
I think that would be preferred. Yeah.
I'm up with that. I don't know if the Sierra portion would be his procedure as opposed to, we would just have to change the website
Yeah.
information. Thank you. I don't know. The policy.
Alright. So I'll move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
I
Okay. Director's report.
Happy to answer any questions, or give any update. I did hear back from Councilwoman Taylor, and she said April or May would be fine for her for the budget presentation, so. whatever is good for her.
With property tax backfill,
Um,
no idea what, I couldn't parse that at all.
So does anybody want to give a summary of that? Basically, when some changes were made in the city of how different types of property were taxed, that created a gap in what the city was going to take in. So the state offered a backfill program that would sort of prorate the tax income for a set number of years. And those years have run out. And in our community, the biggest impact was how multifamily dwellings, rental units were taxed. It used to be at 100%. You're not,
Remember.
so I might, it used to be at 100% and it was then changed to the residential rate,
Yeah.
which was significantly lower.
Yeah,
So.
they cut commercial property taxes.
For a college town with a small student housing.
Yeah.
We're vulnerable.
This is the legislature. it's done
Yeah,
this.
Yes, yes. And there were some errors in calculation of when that would sort of run out, the backfill process that really kind of came to a pain point this fall. So cities that had already approved the next fiscal year's budget or had prepared that for approval for their councils. The corrected numbers came in after that step had taken place, which depending on a city's overall finance approach could be pretty significant or meaningful.
Are we expecting a hit to our budget? I mean, is this?
No, right now, we're not expecting a change to the next year's budget. Iowa City has a pretty stable and relatively conservative savings element to their overall budgeting, and right now, the city administrator thinks that we're probably gonna hold steady with what was approved, which was, again, relatively flat, but that's better than a reduction at this point.
Right.
And I think if there was a reduction, that would probably just be sort of an across the city call to see what we could cut out, but we're gonna keep.
We're not looking to that. Great.
How about when I was reading over the minutes from last month's meeting, it mentioned the library levy possibly being threatened.
That'd be a good time to do legislative updates.
Yeah, so we prepared an update to
Why don't we-
the legislation that we went through. No, this is a great time to do it, because it was in last month's board report, really, that we outlined it. We just have a verbal, right, which we did because it's changing every 2 hours. But if you want to start with the.
Yeah, start with the levy information. So there's actually 2 big property tax reform bills that are on the table. There's one in the House and one in the Senate. Senate File 356 is the bill that would talk about the levies, and so that would eliminate the library levy. What it would do is it allow cities to take those levies, put them all in a general fund and not be able to distribute them as they see fit, as opposed to having specific levies. And there's confidence right now that that bill is going nowhere in this particular legislative session. The reason for that is that the House bill has a very drastically different property tax bill, which is that they want to only allow a property's assessed valuation to increase 3% a year, regardless of how property valuations change within a city, which would really impact Iowa City as to just skyrocket. So they're not anywhere near coming close together. But that being said, that's something we're going to have to definitely watch next year, because there'll be some work on doing some property tax reform. That is that's a priority for the legislature as well as the governor. We'll just have to watch for those impacts on their budget. The state reorganization bill, which was now numbered Senate File 514 and House File 662, passed both the Senate and the House and has gone to the governor for signing, which will be signed imminently. This moved the State Library of Iowa to the Department of Administrative Services, removed the oversight capacity of the Commission for Libraries. We don't know what the full impacts are going to be for us as an organization, but we'll keep you abreast of those. And it's going to take a huge amount of time to kind of put that together and to have that implemented in place. That being said, thank you for writing the state. We did get a little bit of traction, as Ellsworth wrote in his director's report, that the state, there was a state senator did write an amendment, it didn't pass, but someone read it and someone listened, and that was nice. And then Iowa Public Radio, I'll do the spotlight on. Some other bills, the education reform bill, which was Senate File 496. That's the new number of the bill that we were watching for the impacts of the AIM card. It had an expansion of the definition to sexually explicit material, included a provision that written consent from a guardian will be required for any student to check out any book on a specific list of a book that was banned in any school library. And that's just in school libraries, but we were worried that with the AIM card and having that agreement with the school district, there might be an impact. This bill was passed in the Senate last night, right, Sam? Yes. And but it has an uphill battle in the House. So there's some disagreements in the House about the inclusion of those lists. But most likely the age appropriate language will stay. So we'll keep you abreast of that. The other one we talked about last month was visual representation of a minor. It's Senate File 221 that passed both chambers and has been signed. We'll watch to see if that broader definition of sexual exploitation of a minor in a visual representation, if that has any impact on this. There was some fear from the lobbyists that any comic that includes sexual activity might be is. And then the last one is Senate File 391, which was the changes to the teacher librarianship. This bill removed the teacher certification requirement for school librarians, so that would allow public librarians to be hired in those positions. That bill passed, but we're seeing that there might be some legal issues tied to that bill because the teacher librarian is under the Department of Education. A public librarian certification is now under the Department of Administrative Services. Those are different departments. So they have to work out who's going to certify who to work where. But next Friday is another funnel week. And that means that Senate and House bills need to be passed by the chamber to be considered in the other chambers. The next week, they can only consider bills actually passed by the other chamber. So excitement is coming to an end soon.
We promise.
Yeah. I still believe in time.
Good for you.
And if anybody is newer or hasn't thought about the library levy in a while, Iowa City Public Library has the highest possible library levy in the state, which is a 27 special levy for the library. We are anxious to see what will happen with this sort of bigger picture. There are other parts of the bill that speak to creation of a loft tax and other things like that that would essentially increase city tax revenue, but obviously would lose the library designation, which the community voted for with a significant pass rate, 68%. And what I see the levy doing is taking the volatility out of which essentially means a budget. So it gives us a piece that sort of stabilizes. And we will work with city finance as necessary, depending on how things go, to see how we could manage this long term. But we are one of the few larger libraries in the state that has a significant levy. There are other libraries that have a 27%, but they tend to be smaller, often semi-rural or rural.
You mentioned that the city council member was willing to come in April or May. You mentioned it being tied to the budget, but it's tied to the strategic plan, is that?
It is, I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay. So, I guess my inclination would be to suggest April rather than May, because there's 2 policy reviews in May. I don't know if that's a reason or not, but
Fair reason.
It's a good reason.
okay. So maybe you can ask her if she is her, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Before we leave, also it's recorded this. Robin and I were both at Drag Family Storytime, and I'll just speak for myself. The staff did a remarkable job of organizing and running that event. It was hence a very difficult situation, and despite what you read in the paper, nothing happened. There were words were exchanged. That was about the extent of it. And I'll also say that in addition to Officer Bailey, I talked to 3 or 4 other city staff members who came over just to be supportive. I think that's a great thing for the library. Staff wanted to show their support.
Yeah, I think Steph did a great did a great job, and really de-escalate a situation. I'm not sure if I agree there was only verbal altercation.
I don't know who touched who, but let's
there
just
was-
say it was not raucous.
That was not raucous.
There wasn't
Having been
pushing and shoving.
during the room and standing
Yeah.
there, I mean, there was invasion of personal space,
Yes. Yes, definitely.
active invasion of personal space. However, I do have a question about it. When we have a protester who becomes an obstruction to the delivery of services, as the one person standing in the middle of the program so that view was blocked and children could not fully participate, do we have a more freedom to say to the person, you're now disrupting our ability to work within our mission? And the people who are protesting on the edge, who I spoke with rather extensively, and I thought they were going to come tonight actually, are different to me than a person who stands in the middle of children to intimidate. And I'm wondering, what are our rights to say you're stopping the mission of the library at this point?
So that particular instance was something that Kevin Bailey and I talked about there, and he actually spoke to the legal team from the program to make sure we were following the right procedure with that. Because there was technically room to move around in the space, and the people behind that person
Could have received it.
could have
Okay.
somewhere to go that they would be able to see.
So one person doing it is okay, 3 or 4 people that were taking up more physical space would be a problem.
I think if we could have said the person or people are blocking, that people don't have another option there, so there's not another place where they can go to see or hear or whatever the issue is. That is different.
That would constitute.
I think then we could have asked them to move, and the if needed, an officer could have.
I mean, it's a tense moment when you have someone in the middle of children with a sign.
I will say that I was talking to Sergeant Bailey about that, and he said, even if I could remove him,
It could escalate.
that's probably not what we want the kids to remember about today.
Right.
Because he said, I know the guy, it's gonna be ugly.
Yeah, I'm just saying in terms of policy or setting rules, because I think the staff did a very good job of saying,
Yeah.
allow families with children to be up front and people without children to sit towards the back. Except this person didn't follow this policy, and do we have an opportunity to address it in any way? I understand why the decisions were made there, but looking proactively, I don't think this issue's over.
And I think,
We did talk about too, that, I mean, it's caught on several different tapes from that day of him not complying with any staff requests.
Right, right.
And we talked with Sergeant Bailey about that as well.
He
To,
was baiting everyone.
yeah, about whether or not, not doing anything, like Elzer said, confrontational during the program, but
Yeah.
that Sergeant Bailey may follow up with that individual later, letting him know that he failed to comply with staff requests, but we've not heard that, whether or not that conversation took place.
and we talked a lot about, typically for that kind of program, we wouldn't have put chairs in the back, certainly not that number of chairs.
But it was wise to.
But I think it did give space for people who were there without children. And, I think we learn more every time we do these programs. And I think that the designated seating on the floor, despite one person ignoring that, to me felt like a step in the right direction, and also having adult seating in the back. It continues to frustrate me that, children were sort of in the hall because we were at capacity, and we had a number of adults that chose to stay in the program, and that's their right. They can do that. We talked with legal quite a bit about that too. But what are the rules about allowing staying that you can't come in without a child? And that's it's discrimination. So,
However, could an announcement be made to say there are children who can't enter the room because we're beyond capacity? Because I think if we put the children as the
Yeah.
priority in the room, I'm not sure what would have happened, but I'm thinking you probably thought this through.
one thing that we tried with this one was to, and really Mary Reddington was the driver on this, and I think it worked really well, was to sort of limit the idle time between doors opening and programs starting. So she did sort of a quick, like, general big story time. Welcome, we try to listen, we try to not speak over each other, and then go, because it felt like.
I think so too. It was very wise.
Of sort of surging
Very
energy
smart.
was there, and
Mhm.
that I think I think there are a few things we did this time that were
Really
new
well.
that we would certainly implement again. And I will say that we've had not a lot, just a very few comments, not even really made to us, but we've seen on social media or things like that, questioning the decision to have an officer there. And we talked at length about,
That's a lot.
we know that is comforting to some populations, discomforting to some populations, and sometimes can escalate things. But in the end, we decided that was the right step, and I gave quite a bit of information to the police chief about what the event was, why we were requesting an officer, what our vision for the officer and the staff interaction to look like. And I couldn't have been more pleased with Officer or Sergeant Bailey, who I didn't already share this. He was he does police plan for Pride every year, and he's very confident about First Amendment legal speed. And I thought his overall program management was a really good fit for the program. It makes me think that as we communicate about this event with the public, that is a piece that we could talk about, is why did we make the proactive decision to have police presence there?
I think it was a good idea. I'd like to see more of them here, actually, for events like this. My concern is the children. My concern is that some highly unstable person, you all know what I mean, could do something even worse. And I think that one police officer, especially if you have another one of these events, that's going to be, highly populated by children, especially. I don't care about adults as much because they're going to have at it one way or the other. But In fact, I thought in this event, the children acted more mature than the adults
They did.
on both sides of the political spectrum. From what I observed on streaming video. But, you know, I'm really concerned about the safety. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm against these events. I know that there are probably people who know me, know that I'm conservative, evangelical Christian. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have these events. In fact, I'm in favor of it, actually. My take on it is that if you don't like it, don't attend it. But don't, it doesn't need to be banned. But I'm just, my main concern is the safety issue. And if there's another event like this and, you know, a bunch of people decide, you know, they're gonna have more protesters or, you know, whoever's organizing this, you know, that's my concern. If we could have, you know, maybe 2 officers or something. I think that in the end, you know, I was a parent once upon a time, 3 children, and, you know, I would have been comforted more so if I saw people running around with signs and they're swearing and using all that kind of language. I would have been more comforted in knowing at least there's some protection here. I don't know. I mean, is there a way to, I mean, we can't say, I understand we can't say, for instance, well, if you don't have children, you can't come here, or you have to, you know, have a child to kind of, it's your ticket of entrance or whatever. But is there a way to make it so that I'd have to go down and look at this area again, but is there a way to make it so only children can be in that area and not all these other, you know, take the adults and put them in the back of the room?
I don't know if we could do that. I'd be worried about that being a slippery slope.
We asked city legal that specifically, and they said no. They did talk to us about saying, at children and family story times or events that we could say no signage in future ones, but we did not have enough time to, that would require opening several policies and getting to you to approve, and we did not have enough time to do that.
And it would mean no
That's
signage
interesting.
at programs, period.
Period.
And I think that's a conversation.
Yeah, and we just had, there was not enough time for any leadership team to, besides Ellsworth and I, to discuss that. We did talk as the public relations team watched the online chatter. We did talk. I went multiple times and said, do we need more than one officer? And, you know, Ellsworth would email back and forth with Sergeant Bailey, and he had a plan. I think he also did a great job because he had another officer drop him off instead of having a squad car downtown. But there was another officer within the area that would come and essentially be his backup, or just pick him up when it was over.
What about the safety of the folks that were doing the actual story time?
We talked to Mary Anderson, who's a children's programmer, talked to all of the performers ahead of time. And the 3 that were here also were here at the last one in October. So we kind of talked about, let's get here a little bit earlier so we can have you arrive at the staff entrance, and we'll let you come in that way. We put up a screen, a wall divider that was right off of the meeting room exit and right into our staff area. That way Mary could escort them out right that way. And those doors do say staff only. And so since they were invited guests, they are considered staff, so they could be back in that area, but no one else would be able to go back to that.
Okay, because I am concerned about them, obviously.
Yeah, after the last time, several of us escorted them out of the building after the last program and walked with them either to their vehicles or and this time it didn't seem like there was a need for it. They didn't ask for it this time. And I think it helped that as soon as we got done with the family story time, we had to turn around and set up the room for 125 kids to come and play bingo. So it's like, all right, everyone has to go because we just started bringing out tables and everyone just kind of dispersed.
Oh, wow.
We also strategically and very thoughtfully moved the craft portion up to the children's room. And I am
Right.
no adults followed the parents and the kids up to the story time room. I am so glad that that space was respected and kept as it typically is. It's just children and families. And so, because in October we had done the craft right down there in the same area in the meeting room space, and that allowed people to linger in the rooms. So by moving it up to the story time room and out of that space, it really dispersed the group out. So
Okay,
I
well,
think that was
and-
another smart decision.
Safety is the driver in our conversation. I mean, followed by enjoyment. We want it to be an environment that kids can enjoy themselves in, and sort of weighing all that together. In this case, I felt like Sergeant Bailey had like Andrew said, a plan for getting back in the community, and we didn't reach that threshold. But that will absolutely be part of the next conversation, even if it was sort of, what about having someone in the lobby and someone in the room, even just during the beginning, and sort of get the
Yeah.
vibe.
well, I like the idea of limiting the time that people have to kind of mill around.
Right.
And from my observation, I was in the room most of the time and in the sort of the lobby the rest of the time. From what I could see, much or all of the conflict, the heated conversations were sets of adults that had come without children.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of the people who had come with children were sort of busy tending to the children. So that was either finding the last mitten and going to the children's room.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that was exclusively what happened, but it felt to me like there was definitely pain point there.
Okay.
So my perspective, again, might be a little bit different. So I sat with the protesters because the staff had asked, would some of people who are in support actually sit in the front row to make eye contact? And we had a chance to talk to some of them. And I just want to say a couple of things. One thing is I found the parents that were most concerned, it was about the videotaping. The taping and the right to privacy. And I think we need to make clear about what the rules are about taping children in a public space and what we can and can't do. Because I think that was a major concern, the intimidation of being filmed. Second thing is some of the protesters, when the protesters I talked to after, and I thank them for allowing me to sit there with them and for not harassing the children because they didn't all. I mean, their presence was intimidating, but a few of them said, look, we're here because we don't want to bother the children. We're opposed to the parents. But I think there was some common ground in saying, they didn't, not everyone they wanted to disrupt. There were some people there who were very aggressive. So I'm hesitant to put everyone in one category because there were some real aggressors, but not everyone's. And then the third is I wanted to share an interesting comment on behalf of the staff where there was someone who was sitting in this group. I think I was the only one sitting there kind of participating. So it was a weird position to be in, but someone behind me turned and said to her husband, this isn't what you told me it was going to be. This was great. You told me it was going to be a strip show. There's an educational, it was just one of those conversations you overhear. I think there was an educational community building of saying, this is the reality and this is what the noise is about. It's simply story time.
Yeah.
So I value that, but I also thought it was vulnerable for that person to say to the other one, this isn't what you told me it was going to be. So there were some positive. I just think we had some aggressive people in that room who were waiting for an
There
explosion.
was
They wanted to
another
invade space. And
Individual who told Sergeant Bailey the same thing. He's
Right.
like, I came here and I didn't
yes,
realize this is what it was going to be. He's like, there's a lot of good families here.
right. These are families in the right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just want to make sure it wasn't an us versus them. It was a lot of community members, some of whom were highly inappropriate.
And I think, and someone needs to correct me if I'm right, there were at least a small group that came that you'd have to fairly call counter protesters that came,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
so. You
Or
know,
there was an interaction between the two.
yeah, and people came with signs, they can, you know, supporting the event, which again is fine, although I would really encourage discussion of a no sign policy.
Right.
Yeah,
think
can
so
we
too.
do that? Because some of those signs were really just
Yeah.
distasteful.
And the hatred signs. yeah.
And they block views if people are moving on.
And they could be used for, whack someone.
Exactly, as I told Elsie at the university, we had a no sticks on signs policy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a good idea.
That one gentleman,
I'm just
he
thinking
had a very
signs.
large,
Yeah.
looked like on camera, it looked like a
Right.
large sign. I thought, dear.
So, and I told the people I was saying would come to the trustees meeting, talk about it there, don't do it here. And that's why I thought maybe one or two would come, but
Not interested.
I did say thank you for letting us know that there's room for us to come. They didn't show, but I think it's just easy to say it was a two different groups. I think there was a mixture of people and there were a few really aggressive people in there.
So you can ban signs, but you just need to do it across the
I
board.
don't know.
I didn't do it as like a regular, I think
Programming
to the-
policy.
To the programming or to the behavior policy, probably both, that are excluded, and then we would have to define what is a sign. If I come with a sign on a stick, I'm told there's no sign, and I take the sign off the stick and I tape it to my shirt, and it's no sign. So there is a nuance to what that looks like, but city legal, I mean, it sounded doable. I think we would just want to make sure that everybody was in agreement to what that meant and what the implementation of the change would look like.
And you'll never be able to exclude all messages. I mean, someone, if a teacher made up their message,
Yeah.
that's fine,
That's-
you know,
Right.
but that doesn't block anyone's view and it's not.
It doesn't necessarily intimidate.
Right, so.
What were, for the, because you don't get that on camera, what were the children making of all this? I mean, were they sort of not paying attention to it, or were they?
Very.
It was not as noticeable, it was not as noticeable as last time. Last time there were kids, especially when they were walking in. I was in the hallway with a lot of the protesters the last time when they were kind of surrounding me, and I think that was a little scary to see a group of men verbally attacking their librarian. And this time there was more people, we held people out in the lobby, so there were more people out there. It was not as intimidating when families walked in. The room was crowded, really crowded this time, so kids could not get up and move as well. But the last time the room wasn't crowded and kids really there were so many individuals standing in the back, kind of just towering over everyone. So there was a lot of standing the last time,
Yeah.
and kids did not move around as much. This time I'd say they didn't move around as much because there was really no room to dance.
The vast majority of the room were, I would say, were respectful to the performance. So there wasn't, there was, with 400 people, you're gonna have a little chatting and things, but there wasn't any heckling or any shouting. And I was surprised with, I guess, how engaged the kids did seem. And maybe it just felt to them like, well, there's an audience sort of sitting in the back and I'm with my family unit and we're here to watch this. I think, kids are pretty perceptive, and when there were sort of arguments before and after the story time, I think that there was some sort of wide-eyed expression and maybe holding closer to their adults. But during the event, it did seem like kids were enjoying it and able to engage fairly typically.
So just for clarification with me, if a parent public says to someone, do not record my child, do they have any rights whatsoever?
So I can't answer that since I'm not a lawyer, but what I know from speaking with legal about this event is because the library is a public place, we
That they're open.
can't,
There cannot be an
we can't say no.
But not for us to get public, does the parent, as the custodian of the child, have a right to say? Please,
Recording,
once
the
you
way
say
it was
stop
reported
recording
in
my
the
child.
newspaper article.
I
The
don't.
policeman was saying that you really can't, it's a public space, and
I
so.
can double check, we can explicitly check with legal, We also do allow it for our.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I saw parents standing up saying, please stop recording my child. You're intimidating my child. And those are the ones that I wish we could have advocated for, but I didn't know, do we have any flexibility to say they've asked you to stop recording their child? So I'm just clarifying, like, do we have any wiggle room to protect the family units here to say, they've just asked you to stop that, let's. I mean, they were actively doing it to upset the parent, but. You know, just to check, do we have any, again, it's obstruction of us being able to deliver a program.
I will ask.
I'm not optimistic,
Sorry, do you think that I guess the attendance was impressive, I will say that. Do you think that's due to kind of the, the heightened awareness, I guess, of all the legislation in Des
Spring
Moines
break.
right now?
It was a
Spring break.
And
Okay.
I mean, the rest of the week you had several hundred
Yeah.
of events. Certainly some of the adults, especially unaccompanied adults, were there
We're all hyped up about that.
because of
Yeah.
the topic. But I think if it had been a
Well,
story time or a different one, we probably would have had to.
it was not in June of 2018, I think was our highest drag family storytime attendance. We had well over 400 in the room. And I turned away about 125 that day. But it was also on the day of the Pride Parade and it was raining outside. So people were waiting for the parade and they came in to enjoy the show. So it is on, on scale of another story time that we had that the other drag family story time we had.
I will say there seemed to be a decent number of people who had never been to the library before. And the reason I think that is either they asked, how do we get to the story time room, or is there a bathroom nearby, or said, this is the first time we've been in the library.
Waverly.
Yeah, so
Well, that's a good
I
thing.
think it's a positive indicator.
Yeah. Well, thank you to the staff, though. I'd like to thank all of you too. I did a great job.
There were 5 library card signups in the first 10 minutes, so that they
Thank you again, Ellsworth, for the communication both ahead and after.
Well, I think
Much appreciated.
Do we have a policy about photographing in the library?
Thank you, cool and groovy people. Library is the crown and the jewel and the crown, if I would say. I believe.
we explicitly say that we do not limit. I mean, anybody can photograph others in a meeting room or event. Is that the language, event or program? And then in the rest of the library, I mean, it's still a public place, but we typically, I mean, we have much less of an issue in the rest of the library when we ask people to photograph from behind so that faces aren't visible. But my understanding right now is that we actually may not be able to limit it anywhere, even, our policy can't override.
Practice we do ask that film crews do not do it as public service points where people are circulating books because that is no actual privacy concern, but I'm not sure what level you have, but it is a part of practice, right?
Yeah, when we're working with somebody who asks us or is cooperative, we would always ask that, we prefer, if you're gonna do like a news interview with a staff person, have a range of books or a wall behind you instead of other patrons. We try to protect that as much as we can. Even though
It'd be very hard to enforce it because you can photograph clandestinely.
Right.
Now, anybody can. I mean, it used to be you had to hold it up to your eyes. It was quite, obvious, but now.
I think this was aggression.
Yeah.
In the recording at this event.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't front, but people putting phones across from each other.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Oh, and Angie, I had one more question. Is there any, did you hear anything from the Queens on whether or not they would be less interested in returning, that's something I'm worried about.
Yep, they're all super happy and they'll be back whenever.
Fired up, ready to go. Cool.
Anything else on this topic? No. Okay, departmental reports. Anna, no, Jason's up.
I just realized that the crowning achievement for the road is right on your packet. So I'm gonna show you on my phone, which.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, it does look different.
L is cut off and the D.
The
gets
D.
cut off.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Oh,
better than
okay.
what You saw.
Oh, I see.
It's letters.
Right, because I looked at.
That's a lot better. Yeah.
I
I thought this was great. That's bad.
Realize there were letters.
Lot more sense.
I found it, but this is bad.
Yeah, right, you found it, like,
Yeah.
better.
I think the translation from doc to PDF.
Tale as old as time.
But it's also useful from the CAS report, because technically I didn't make that move at all to the department, but still it's really.
Does.
So when people ask us what company we went through and created on this whole This company.
This
It's what-
Well, and like I said in the report, it's kind of cool to think of it more as like farewell welcome too.
Yeah.
So I'll always think of it that way.
She did a really good job with all of her.
It's brilliant.
And this social work thing is working out well.
Yeah, we met, packet back. Grace met yesterday for her first meetup with staff. It's a drop-in program, but it was on the topic of crisis intervention. I did not get to attend this morning, so I'm not sure if people were able to drop into that one. There was a duplication of yesterday's for a different time. And it was multi-departments yesterday, different job classes, so it was really nice to talk through many things that we've talked through as a group in other ways, but just nice to have Grace's perspective, who is practicing social work, but also learning at school, and her learning how we interact with folks is useful as well, and talk through scenarios, and also I attended so I could sort of be the liaison for staff in case it got into sort of HR territory. And came with some good ideas about how we can training for different levels, like specifically temporary hourly. So it's been really positive. And her next one will be on trafficking, and she's also just sort of taking in new ideas as we go along. And we have a full team staff finally, which is so happy. So Katie doesn't have to work 5 days a week anymore. And we have somebody on the weekends. So really excited. Wing is super great. Very invested in youth of Iowa City and sure everyone is from supporting. So, you know, every time you open those jobs, you kind of wonder if you're gonna find anybody that is the right fit. And so you go through a lot of interviews with people who just are great people and just love libraries. And then, but you're waiting for that one person who says, like, you know, I really want to work with you. And it's funny how few there are. Once you tell them what the job actually gives, or you kind of in a room with a bunch of teenagers.
We close the door.
They just slowly stand up and walk backwards out.
Say me close connection.
I'll just write a check. It'll be fine.
Okay, wonderful. Sam, your report, did people have questions, comments? I'm sorry, the Freedom to Read event had to move indoors.
It did. Whenever the local bill can be present somewhere, it obviously drives a lot of joy for me, but the fact that we have a band and LGBT archive join us. I think it's wonderful. Isn't it just great to have a moment to celebrate what we accomplished here? And I just unfolded the space points and to remember that. Even the whole bill has been invited to the Johnson County Fair for its first time, so I feel like we evened out. It's all right.
I guess what's really too bad is the weather's not nice.
It's not snowing in July, I'm gonna be okay.
Okay,
I wanted to call out specifically ILA Legislative Day and just everyone that participated in that. I think of Captain America because there's some quote from Captain America, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically when things are difficult, you plant your feet and someone's telling you to move and you say, no, you move. And that's what I felt, what I saw out of you.
I did take my gavel, which is slowed down, but that was interesting to get through some very. Maybe cap shield. next time. Thank you, DJ, for that feedback. That's good.
okay, Katie, your report's up next.
I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any details that anyone would like.
Not report, but thank you for the update on the events
Yeah.
from Mickey's today. And
Yeah. Yeah, if you want to go to Mickey's afterward, it's a wonderful place called the Iowa City Public Library.
and they're ready for you. I went before we came here. They're ready.
Sorry, what was that last thing you said?
I said, they're ready. I went before I came here.
Oh, great.
Oh, nice. I'll be
I
happy.
said, are you guys doing this? And I said, yeah.
How much do events like that generate? Are those-
Oh, anywhere
Hundreds,
between
$200.
$400 and $700. Yeah. Yeah.
That's more than.
More than I would have thought, yeah.
Yeah. And we've been doing additional promotions on those events. In particular, emailing our body of donors and letting them know that this stuff's going on. So yeah, we're hoping for a nice turnout for this event.
Yeah.
We have a wine fundraiser on Friday. And then the foundation is also helping to support the retreat on Saturdays.
So cool.
News articles were interesting, but you can all read those. President's report, as usual, I don't really have a report. The nominating committee has met, but it's a work in progress, and we'll be announcing our slate of officers at the next meeting. Also, at the next meeting, I am to report to appoint 2 people to be the board representatives to the Library Foundation board. So if that interests you, or even if it doesn't, well, you're willing to do it. Let me, it is, and my standard thing is because I did it for a couple years and it was very valuable because it will help me understand better how the 2 boards work together, and a real appreciation for how hard the foundation works and what a significant contribution they make to the library. So to me, it is really a very worthwhile thing to do. I would encourage people, tagging onto what Katie said, is to attend the wine thing and the Freedom to Read event if you have a spare few minutes on Saturday afternoon to stop by. The wine event, I've been once they kept moving it last year. Somehow the date kept changing, and finally it settled on a date when I was out of town, so I didn't go. And then I did go the last one before COVID, and it's really fun. It's really, I recommend it. It's kind of a fun thing.
Then we did have a meeting of the governance committee for Friends Foundation on Monday.
Okay,
The only big thing that we were talking about had to do with a minor reorganization that will affect the bookend. Katie could probably speak to it with more detail, but that is something that we will bring to the Friends Foundation board, but does not require our board action.
Okay.
all right. And there's no other. I noticed that the next meeting was like the 27th, so I didn't even ask if there was a report, but I didn't realize you were on the governance committee. So you've gone above and beyond, because you don't actually have to be on a committee. I thought you did.
Dropping out now.
Please don't.
I thought you did, so I signed up for the fundraising committee. The next year I realized you have to be on a committee.
It's so fun.
Yeah, I never did that. Anyway, good for you because you're more involved that way. Okay, announcements from members? None? Committee reports, well, we had the governance committee and the officer nominating committee, I sort of, it's not ready to report yet. Communications, we saw the email. He was very complimentary of the staff. And the consent agenda is next. I need, if there are no changes or corrections, I need a motion to approve it. There are,
Move.
Yeah. okay. Need a
Second.
second, all in favor?
I,
Great. Okay. Then the agenda for next month doesn't have any policy reviews. We'll appoint to the foundation board and elect our officers. The third quarter financials and statistics will be in that packet, right? Did you want to meet for half an hour before the meeting like we did last time?
I think it'd be-
Okay, it's, okay. We'll touch base with Claire on that. And then we'll hear from the city council person about the strategic plan. I think that would be interesting to see how we. Okay. In that case, we don't vote on the agenda for the next meeting, right? At this point. No. Okay. Therefore, I think I'm ready to adjourn the meeting.